Hello, dear viewers. Today on our agenda is a story that has everyone on edge. How in Kyiv, right before our eyes, the last barriers to mobilization are crumbling. For the first time in the entire war, the capital is entering such a severe state of martial law that even the most confident people have stopped believing in normal life. Exemptions are being revoked. Protections that shielded people from conscription. Checkpoints are springing up everywhere, patrols are forcing their way into apartment buildings, and draft lists are growing longer than the queues for groceries. And all of this is happening at the very moment when the European Union appears to be handing Ukraine a long-awaited lifeline in the form of a massive loan and a new sanctions package. But here is the catch: everything has stalled because of an ultimatum. Hungary, through Viktor Orban, is demanding Russian oil via the Druzhba pipeline, and only then is willing to discuss aid. That is diplomacy through a gas station for you. All of this unfolds against the backdrop of the most intense Russian offensive in the Zaporizhia and Kostiantynivka areas. There, it is no longer just armor and artillery. Swarms of strike drones are in play. Airstrikes are hitting residential districts, and the news is filled with nothing but short, out-of-context clips. Hard evidence is scarce, and anxiety is in abundance. History has shown us something similar more than once. Think back to the early 1940s in Moscow, when mobilization swept the city in waves while the Allies dragged their feet on Lend-Lease, bargaining over every extra crate. The stakes were already dizzying back then, and the cost of a mistake was beyond human measure. Now history seems to be repeating itself. Only the cards are different, the weapons are more precise, and the information war is raging on every front, sparing no one. Let us break it all down. Why is it that March of 2026 specifically is becoming the threshold beyond which none of the key players has any road back? The Ukrainian front, the European front, the Middle Eastern knot, everything is tightening like a coiled spring. Are you ready for an unexpected ending? Then keep this in mind: the lifting of restrictions on Belarus is not a gesture of goodwill. It is a calculated move, several steps ahead, and the key here is not to miss the undercurrents. Especially when Russia begins gathering forces on the Caspian Sea and builds a window into Iran right under the Americans' noses. Do not look away. By the end, this game will test everyone's nerves, and the final move may prove just as unexpected as a sudden castling in chess. Use your imagination. Kyiv, the 20th of March. The sun has not yet risen, but the city is already on edge. Every courtyard is under the watchful eye of patrols. Concrete blocks seal off intersections, and crowds gather at bus stops, not for bread, but for exemption documents proving a right not to serve. Now everyone who has not secured the right paperwork is at risk. For the first time in the entire war, streets are being mass-patrolled. Police block traffic in broad daylight and pull young men out of crowds. The hunt is carried out almost with sniper precision, targeted and without ceremony. Pay attention here. Even in the capital, this level of intensity has never been seen before. Why so suddenly? Simply put, a manpower shortage that can no longer be papered over by the old rules. Individual officers report that over recent months, losses have worsened to the point where even battle-hardened, seasoned units are experiencing breakdowns. If Kyiv's mobilization still seemed sluggish and manageable during the winter, it is now on the brink of a countdown. The army is holding on by its last reserves. In essence, Zelensky's team now needs not a delayed, but an immediate million new fighters. And that, when you think about it, is as if an entire large city had suddenly disappeared. For the front, this means one simple thing: gaps are being patched, and even those who were once considered untouchable are being swept up. There are no more rotations or shifts. Soldiers go weeks without leave or a hot meal. The army is starting to resemble a basketball team with no substitutes. Injuries, exhaustion, key players running on fumes, and the referees no longer hiding the fact that their decisions are really politics, not sport. Western partners are retreating into the shadows, going silent when it comes to concrete commitments. Meanwhile, in Brussels, there is a drama of its own. The European Union, from which everyone expected instant money, has suddenly hit the brakes. The loan is not moving, the new sanctions package is frozen, all because Hungary and Slovakia are unwilling to sacrifice their own interests. The logic here is almost absurd. Either open Russian oil flows to them, or there will be no aid. Orban and Fico are not shy about it. They need fuel, and the entire unified policy can wait. Brussels sighs, promises to find a solution, but those promises warm few hearts, especially in Kiev, where the situation is escalating by the hour. In other words, there will be no more default support. Now within the European Union, everyone is for themselves, each deciding when, to whom, and how much to give. This strips Kiev of that very sense of a reliable rear line that kept the entire front sustained on morale, and without it, confidence crumbles instantly. At this point, as they say, there is no room for sentiment when everything is once again on the line. Now let us turn to the fighting in the south. The situation there is on a knife's edge. The Russian army is intensifying its strikes toward Zaporizhzhia. The primary objective is to break through via Orikhiv and then push toward the regional center. In play are not only the usual tools like tanks, but also massive airstrikes and entire swarms of drones, which in a short time have become a true nightmare for the defense. On both sides, there are reports of fighting inside the city itself, and experts emphasize this is already close-quarters combat, where every apartment building entrance and every intersection matters. But here is an interesting detail: almost no real independent video footage from the scene exists. It feels as though both sides are trying to conceal the scale of their losses and destruction, and the information picture is growing ever more blurred. It is hard to tell where truth ends, where fiction begins, where drones are conducting sweeps, and where the old defensive lines are still holding. For the Ukrainian side, Zaporizhzhia is not just another mark on a map. It is a genuine question of survival for the entire southern front. If Russia consolidates and takes Orikhiv, a dangerous corridor to the Dnipro opens up, and that would mean the risk of entire groupings being encircled. Reserves available to the Ukrainian armed forces in this direction are nearly depleted, equipment and special forces are scattered, and the mobilization in Kiev is a sign that the command is operating on the principle of whatever we have, that is what we hold with. It is as though a coach tells his team there are no more substitutes, whoever gets tired has already lost. Let us go deeper. The Kostiantynivka direction. Here, Russian units are advancing toward Druzhkivka, seizing more and more villages and attempting to close the encirclement around Kostiantynivka. In essence, this is an attempt to surround one of the key nodes of Ukrainian defense. But the Ukrainian armed forces are not surrendering. A series of counterattacks is underway, particularly around Chasiv Yar and the Shevchenko district. Street fighting, artillery operating on the principle of a wall of fire, clearing operations moving house by house. Ukrainian command reports partial successes, but almost immediately there are reports that Russia is for the first time using new armored vehicles and fresh drones at scale. The equipment is moving quickly, like pieces in a chess attack. Here, every miscalculation could cost the entire defensive line. Further north, closer to Kharkiv, Russian drone activity is intensifying. At night, precision strikes are hitting Ukrainian armed forces' temporary positions. Casualty information is vague, but it is confirmed that command posts and equipment have sustained damage. All of this is playing out against a backdrop of what seems like a general pause, as if one side is probing the enemy's defenses for weak points, looking for a gap for the next move. What is the overall picture? The front is transforming into a vast strategic playing field, where each side is searching for an opportunity to deliver a surprise blow. Time is short, resources even shorter, and the stakes are no longer just cities. They are the spirit of the army itself and the calm in the rear. Let us step onto the international stage. This is where the real intrigue begins. The most significant event of recent days is the partial lifting of sanctions on Belarusian enterprises. The Americans officially frame this as a humanitarian measure, but unofficially everyone understands. This is the opening of a financial window through which Russia and Belarus can conduct transactions in oil and fertilizers outside Western restrictions. This gives Moscow breathing room in the most tense phase of the sanctions war. But it is not that simple. At the same time, France has detained a Russian tanker in the Mediterranean for the first time since this entire oil race began. It is a telling move. Europe does not want to shut off the Russian flow entirely, but is willing to catch those who are playing solo and stepping outside agreed-upon limits. The result is like something in a kitchen. You have just taken one pot off the stove when someone puts another one on to heat over a new flame. For Russia and Belarus, this lifting of restrictions buys time. Finances can be stabilized, purchases can be made, resources can be pushed to the front at the very moment when Ukraine is in genuine financial catastrophe. This is essentially a chance to gain a couple of months for regrouping. But there is no guarantee. Everything is very fragile. Too many hidden agreements, too many hidden rocks beneath the surface. The Middle East fires off its own crisis. The night before, Iranian air defenses shoot down or seriously damage a next-generation American fighter jet. The aircraft was forced to land in Saudi Arabia, sending genuine shock through military circles around the world. The United States says its air defenses were suppressed. Iran is triumphant. Such an incident is the first in the entire history of their confrontation. Immediately, a series of coalition strikes is carried out against Iranian ports and Caspian facilities. Britain, France, Saudi Arabia and Israel acting together with a single goal: to project power and knock Iran out of the game. And here is where Moscow finds itself at a fault line. Rumors have emerged that Russia is urgently conducting consultations on the possible deployment of troops to protect its facilities in Bushehr. At the same time, long convoys are moving out of Tajikistan, supposedly carrying humanitarian aid for Iranian refugees. But according to rumors, the trucks contain consignments of drones assembled at a local factory. If true, a new supply route is being established that bypasses all Western barriers. Such a maneuver gives Russia leverage. It can now pressure the West by threatening intervention on Iran's side. But there is a flip side. If Moscow genuinely enters this conflict, a direct clash with the coalition becomes unavoidable, and that is no longer chess, but more like going all in at poker, where everything is on the table and there is no room for error. Now let us return to the central intrigue. Why did the United States suddenly agree to lift sanctions on Belarus? Officially, flexibility; unofficially, an attempt to buy time on one front in order to focus on the Middle Eastern crisis. Experts are divided. Either Washington wants to nudge Minsk toward distancing itself from Moscow, or it is simply plugging a hole to avoid stretching its forces across two conflicts. Either way, when the White House offers concessions, it is often only the window display. And behind it, a far more dramatic turn of events is already being prepared. What are the consequences? Ukraine finds itself in a triple trap: a shortage of people, no money, and every day the threat of losing another city. Europe, rather than presenting a united front, is sliding into trading between its own interests. Everyone has their own priorities. Paris and Berlin wavering between principles and profit. The United States throws its economic cards on the table. Lifting sanctions here is not a friendly gesture. It is simply an attempt to buy time and gain room to maneuver. Russia and Belarus take a short breather, reshuffle assets, and push equipment and personnel to the front. But everything hangs by a thread. France has already detained a Russian tanker, and the coalition on the Caspian is ready to cut off the oxygen if Moscow crosses further past the red line. In the broader sense, this is the moment when all hidden problems and compromises burst into the open. Military staffs on both sides are operating at their limit. Every miscalculation is fatal. It is already like a race. If you brake too late or accelerate too hard, you fly off the track. The line of exhaustion runs not only across front lines, but also through the offices in Paris, Washington, Moscow, and Brussels. And now the countdown has begun. Ukraine has come right up to the energy and financial edge. Aid may not be enough, even for minimum needs, and the front may collapse at the most unexpected point. Russia, too, is stretched. Reserves are limited, but the newly opened Belarusian window offers a chance to regroup. Europe is torn between fear of losing control over energy and the desire to save its alliance. The United States, like an experienced chess player, is choosing which front is the priority right now, and which one can be temporarily released. The most important thing is that no one has a 100% way out. The Ukrainian army is operating at its limit. Society is beginning to run out of steam. The European Union is balancing on the edge of internal contradictions. Russia and Belarus are gaining days, but that gain may come at an entirely different cost. For the United States, the downed fighter is not just a military setback. It is a serious crack in the image of a leader, and that instantly emboldens Iran, China, and even North Korea. And there it is, the reality of spring 2026. All the major players are caught in a financial military trap, and the price of every move is only rising. Someone is detaining tankers, someone is opening loopholes through Belarus, someone is using oil and credit as blackmail. The world has entered an era in which money and restrictions can hit just as hard as a strike drone or a state-of-the-art armored vehicle. What does this mean for Russia, Ukraine, and the entire region? For Moscow, a window of opportunity to reinforce the front, carry out key operations, and prepare for possible changes in the Middle East. For Kiev, the risk of being left to face the crisis alone at its most difficult moment, when the front is barely breathing at several points simultaneously. For Europe, a genuine stress test of internal cohesion. Will the structure hold, or will everyone go back to looking after their own affairs? For the world, a troubling signal. Sanctions and money have become weapons, and any downed aircraft or detained tanker can be the spark for a far larger conflict. Thank you for watching to the end. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe that a severe shortage of resources could push one of the sides toward sharp escalation? Let us discuss different viewpoints. Every argument matters. If this episode was useful to you, do not forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for further developments. See you in the next episode.